Following the previous chapter, after summoning Mad Lan for a confrontation, the Monarch wanted to confirm if the deeply moving and eloquent poem was truly his. To his surprise, Mad Lan not only nodded in admission, but also brazenly declared that it was a text taught to him by Shen Lang, which he had memorized, and then transcribed from memory. Hearing this, the Monarch was both astonished and incredulous, for in such a short period, Mad Lan had managed to remember every word perfectly. Yet, deep within his heart, an indescribable joy began to surface. He secretly looked forward to the day the official rankings were announced, so the world could witness their dumbfounded expressions before receiving a stinging slap in the face. Immediately after the literary examination concluded, the martial arts competition began. 10 beggars, with completely new appearances, appeared in unison, shocking the common people who stared with wide eyes, unable to believe what they were seeing. Even the chief examiner had to pull out their portraits for comparison, and when they didn't match, he switched to fingerprint verification. When the fingerprints finally matched, the 10 beggars strode confidently into the examination hall, ignoring the thousands of scornful glances and resounding laughter from all around. The entire examination lasted 4 days, kicking off with a weightlifting event that sounded exhausting. On the grandstand, 13 judges sat perched like gods, their faces as cold as cash, waiting to see who among the 3,000 contestants divided into 100 groups of 30 would be the first to fail. The content of the test was just as nightmarish. First, each contestant had to lift a 530 kg stone block approximately 350 kg above their head and hold it for 5 seconds. The 10 men, from Lan 1 to Lan 10, all passed with arrogant ease, while other contestants were sweating profusely yet couldn't even budge the weight off the ground. In contrast, they lifted the stones with calm expressions, without a single drop of sweat, as if it were as simple as weaving a basket. The chief examiner felt a chill run down his spine, thinking to himself, damn, what have these beggars been eating to be so freakishly strong? This weight seems far too light for them. Truly terrifying. Below, a contestant who had previously scorned Shen Lang's group of beggars now had to reconsider. He couldn't believe his eyes, gritting his teeth in bitter disbelief. Are these the same beggars from before? Lifting it with just one hand. How is this possible? Unbelievable. The second event didn't stop at just lifting a weight several times their body mass. They then had to carry a 300 kg approximately 200 kg and run 100 meters within 45 seconds. It's safe to say that even a real, World Olympic weightlifting champion would likely fail this combo. This was clearly a martial arts battlefield, where only muscle and sinew were the strong currency. Flashy sword dances and flying techniques could be considered later. But amidst a sea of failures, the two names Lan 3 and Lan 5 stood out proudly like two gods holding up the world. They lifted the stones effortlessly, without a tremor, their faces as calm as if they were carrying a cup of wine. The 13 judges nodded repeatedly upon seeing this, circling their names on the list, sign of outstanding excellence. One contestant was utterly shocked by their relaxed and easy demeanor, never expecting them to be so powerful, moving faster with heavy weights than an ordinary person running empty-handed. Weightlifting was the fundamental basis of the entire martial arts examination. If one couldn't even carry a stone, how could they bear the weight of the nation in the future? Simply failing to lift it, or lifting it but trembling uncontrollably and failing to hold it for 5 seconds, would get you sent straight home. Even if you succeeded, but your posture was as ugly as a one-legged stork, with arms shaking like a coffee addict, and legs trembling as if from a malarial fever, you could still be eliminated on the spot, depending on the judge's mood that day. The rules sounded harsh, but were actually simple. If more than half of the 13 lazy judges drew a slash next to your name, you were invited to an early retirement from the competition. It was that brutal. And you know what? Each group's task took less than a minute, but that brief minute was enough to turn many a proud scholar into a wailing failure. By the end of the first day, which had lasted nearly half the day, 2,000 of the 3,000 contestants had been eliminated. The remaining 1,000, including all 10 of the Lan beggars, advanced to the next round. The martial examination was different from the literary one. You could take the literary exam at 50, but for the martial arts, the door closed after 38. On this battlefield, muscle and endurance were the tickets to pass. After the age of 35, physical prowess declined, and the judges paid no heed. Once you stumbled on the path of martial arts, there was no turning back. Failing the martial examination meant forever losing the chance to become an official, forever losing the chance to change your fate. The second day of the Imperial Martial Arts examination began with archery, divided into 2 rounds, shooting at a fixed target and shooting at a live target. The chief examiner stepped forward to explain the rules, announcing that all arrows had to be shot within the specified time. In 1 minute, each person had to shoot 60 arrows. The rules were clear. Hitting the target was 1 point. The outer ring was 2 points. Hitting the tiny bullseye in the center was a full 4 points. Missing was a 0. And accidentally hitting someone else's target was not only embarrassing but also gave your opponent points. Besides accuracy, the judges also assessed the force of the shot. Each arrow that pierced through the target was impressive. If it just stuck superficially like a weak scratch, even 100 hits would get you marked as physically weak and points would be mercilessly deducted. Soon, it was the turn of Land 3 and Land 5. Both held their bows at the ready. Nearby, another contestant was still smirking at them with contempt. Little did he know who was truly superior. Don't get cocky too soon, he thought. What's the use of brute strength? Archery can't be mastered in a month. This is about skill and experience. But the geniuses of the Lin family all chose the heavy bow, weighing over 1.5 stone. 21. 5s use arrow up and arrow down to select a turn, enter to jump to it, and escape to return to the chat. Whoosh, 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 the arrows flew with hack speed. Ordinary people relied on muscle and skill, but geniuses like them shot with inner energy and spirit. The time limit was 60 seconds, but in just 30 seconds, both had fired all 60 of their arrows and stood with their arms crossed, calmly waiting for the time to run out. The results were a foregone conclusion, 50 out of 60. Every single arrow had hit the bullseye, piercing cleanly through the target. Upon hearing their results, everyone was so shocked their jaws dropped and wouldn't close. It was unbelievable. After 2 hours, the fixed target round ended. More than half of the contestants were eliminated, the number dropping from 1,000 to just 520. Anyone with fewer than 20 points was cut immediately, even those with enough points but a low ranking were kicked out. The afternoon session was even more intense, shooting a moving target. It wasn't about aiming at live animals as rumor, but a soldier hiding in a trench who would unpredictably raise a target board and then lower it. Like a game of whack-a-mole. The position was sometimes left, sometimes right, sometimes high, sometimes low. Hitting it depended entirely on reflexes and a cool head. The announcement to begin rang out. Land 3 aimed straight at the target in front and let fly. It was an incredibly difficult shot, yet he made it. Swiftly, all his arrows whizzed into the bullseye, not a single one deviating by even a millimeter. Witnessing this, the other contestants' eyes went wide with terror. What the hell? Weren't they untrained? How can they shoot so accurately? 4 hours later, the archery competition officially concluded. There were no miracle saves. Those short on points, those who shot wide, or those whose shots were weak had their names struck from the list. Out of 520 people, 320 were eliminated, leaving only 200. Thus, after 2 days of competition, the initial 3,000 contestants had been whittled down to 200. The only good news was that the next day's event was mounted archery, which would likely eliminate half again. To be blunt, a maximum of 100 people would make it to the final day, and the final day, the swordsmanship competition, was the true bloodbath. In this kingdom, the mounted test was even more bizarre. Contestants had to ride a horse for 300 meters, while 20 mud balls were launched at them. They not only had to dodge, but also use their sabers to shatter every single ball. This tested speed, vision, judgment, and precision. But even this couldn't challenge the 10 beggars. They passed with ease. The surrounding contestants felt their skin crawl in horror. Impossible, I've trained for 10 years and still can't do that. How have they surpassed me in just over a month? Damn it. This is unbelievable. The chief examiner was also agape with shock. Have these 10 people really only been studying martial arts for a month? The martial arts examination ended, and the judges began to score and rank. An hour later, the results were announced. Out of 3,000 contestants, only 50 had passed, and all 10 members of the Lan family were on the list. Not only did all 10 of Shen Lang's beggars pass with high marks, but their achievements were brilliant. 5 placed in the top 10, and all 10 were in the top 20. Meanwhile, the first place belonged to Xu Lu of the Xu family, who had claimed the top spot at the age of 20. Second place went to Nangong Zom, the 17-year-old son of the Marquis of Chenbei, Nangong Ao. Just hearing the name sounded like a legendary protagonist. Sadly, the Shins of noble houses who had dreamed of the top 3 were now pushed down to 4th, 10th, or even failed altogether. It was all because the 10 descendants of the Lan family were too overwhelmingly dominant, treating the exam like a hacked game, and crushing the entire field. The chief examiners were panicked. If this list is published, not just the common martial artists, but even the eliminated children of noble generals will riot. It will cause a heaven-shaking uproar. My lord, how should we handle this? If we make it public, the failures will storm the Ministry of War. The vice minister of the Ministry of War thought to himself, that's right, People will definitely suspect cheating. They'll say if beggars can rank this high, what kind of joke is this examination? I am the vice minister, but I can't make this decision. What should I do? Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. Of course, there's still Eunuch Lee. He comes every day, which shows His Majesty places great importance on this examination. I can't bear the consequences, only the Supreme Monarch can. With that thought, he immediately gave an order. Quickly, invite Eunuch Lee here. A moment later, Eunuch Lee appeared. As expected, after one look at the ranking list, his eyes went wide, but then he broke into a broad grin. Heavens, His Majesty will gain great prestige from this. Anyone who dares to call his examination a joke now has a death wish. Just then, the Vice Minister stammered. Perhaps we should first present this list to His Majesty for his review. Hearing this, Eunuch Lee thought, you're just afraid of the storm it will cause and want to push all the responsibility onto His Majesty. He then said decisively, very well, I will copy the list, and present it to His Majesty at once. The Vice Minister breathed a sigh of relief internally. Eunuch Lee grabbed the list, and dashed towards the palace like the flash at a sail. While the martial arts school was still reeling, the literary examination exploded with even more drama. For 3 days and 3 nights, the 6 examiners had argued and voted, selecting 93 essays. This year's genius, Xu Hongding, was expected to take first place, but he was unexpectedly surpassed by a mysterious candidate. The 6 examiners' eyes gleamed with excitement, waiting to see the name. Who on earth could write with such thunderous power? The truth was, the examiners had realized one person was missing, Madlan. At first they thought he had submitted a blank paper. But then, every time they encountered an essay so bad that the ink itself seemed wrong, the entire panel would say in unison, this must be Madlan's. The problem was, there were a lot of terrible essays. Yet, when the name on the best essay was revealed, the name that appeared for first place was Lansen. They were bewildered. Who was Lansen? Another person said in a trembling voice, I think. It's Madlan. The entire examination hall felt like it had been struck by lightning. A man known as a vagrant for over a decade, who had never been properly educated, turned out to be a heaven-sent genius, a once-in-a-century talent in writing and poetry. Was the world mad? Was he mad, or were they all mad? Looking back at his exam schedule, they were horrified. Day 1, 120 questions on the classics. He finished in half an hour. Day 2, an essay on political systems. He finished in less than an hour. The final day, a poetry composition. He spat out verses like a rapper in under 30 minutes. After finishing each paper, he would roll over and sleep. Heavens, a top student who gets his power from sleeping had officially arrived. One examiner suspected the topics had been leaked. But even a leak couldn't produce masterpieces like the Autumn Goose poem or the timeless Eagle Carving Few. Some might spend 10 years and not come up with a single line. He tossed out entire essays as if for fun. This wasn't a genius, this was a monster in human form. If the news that Madlan won first place gets out, the entire capital will shake, one examiner declared. The thousands of scholars will be outraged and will accuse is of cheating. This matter is beyond the authority of the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Rights. We must report it to His Majesty, and let him decide. The news that Madlan had taken the top spot was earth-shattering enough, but then there was the matter of Xinlang's beggars who had all aced the martial arts exam. When these results were released together, the capital would surely explode. Monarch Ning Yuanxian received the news, his face pale, trembling with shock. My God, is there truly karma in this world? He was handed both the literary and martial arts ranking lists. Ning Yuanxian shuddered and thought, Xinlang actually did it. 10 beggars all passed the martial examination, and Madlan took first place in the literary examination. Xinlang hadn't just created a miracle, he had created a new horizon for the imperial examinations from beggar to top scholar, from waste to legend. Eunuch Lee reported, the 2 chief examiners dare not make a decision, and await your Majesty's decree. His Majesty waved his hand casually. What is there to hesitate about? This examination was fair and just, with no cheating whatsoever. Should I yield to the untalented? Publish it. Not only that, post both the literary and martial arts lists together for me. As you command, Eunuch Lee replied. At that moment, Ning Yuanxian was immensely pleased. A satisfied smile spreading across his face. How exhilarating. Truly, utterly satisfying. Finally, I can hold my head high and wash away all humiliation. I, Ning Yuanxian, am no weak and incompetent ruler but a wise monarch of the first order. My eyes can see through to the heroes of the realm, while all of you are the blind and mediocre ones.